Imagine being given a problem that everyone else seems to understand, but instead of accepting the usual answer, you find yourself wondering whether the problem itself has been misunderstood. That was the kind of mind Alan Turing was beginning to develop. On June 23, 1912, Alan Matheson Turing was born in London, to Julius Turing, a civil servant, and Ethel Sarah Turing. His parents' work meant that Alan and his older brother John spent much of their childhood in England, often living with a foster family while their parents were abroad. From an early age, Alan showed a fascination with science, mathematics, and the patterns hidden in the world around him. His surviving school letters reveal a remarkable curiosity. He experimented with chemistry. He designed ideas for machines. He studied maps and natural phenomena. He even became fascinated by ways of measuring and understanding things that other children simply accepted. At Sherborne School, this unusual curiosity continued to grow. Alan was not yet the famous mathematician the world would remember. He was simply a young student who kept asking questions, and who seemed far more interested in discovering how things worked than in following the path everyone else expected. Soon, mathematics would become more than a school subject for him. It would become the language through which he tried to understand the world. At Sherborne School, Alan Turing found something rare. Someone who could understand the way his mind worked. His name was Christopher Morcom. The two boys shared a fascination with science, mathematics, and ideas that reached far beyond their classroom lessons. For Turing, this friendship became deeply important. They studied together, exchanged ideas, and encouraged each other's curiosity. Then, in 1930, Christopher suddenly became seriously ill. He died in February, leaving Turing devastated. Turing's letters from this period reveal how deeply the loss affected him. He began thinking intensely about the relationship between the physical world and the mind, and he continued pursuing the scientific questions that had fascinated both boys. The loss did not make Turing abandon his curiosity. If anything, it drove him deeper into it. He began looking at nature, matter, mathematics, and the possibility that there were underlying rules connecting everything around us. The boy who had once simply enjoyed solving difficult problems was now asking much larger questions. What could the human mind understand? What were the limits of knowledge? And could the deepest truths of the universe be expressed through mathematics? Those questions would follow Turing far beyond Sherborne, and eventually lead him to Cambridge, where he would begin asking questions that no machine had ever been built to answer. In 1931, Alan Turing arrived at King's College, Cambridge, to study mathematics. Here, something changed. For the first time, Turing was surrounded by people who could engage with the questions that had been forming in his mind. He became deeply interested in mathematical logic, especially a problem that asked something extraordinary. Could there be a definite method for deciding whether a mathematical statement could be proved? It sounded like a question for mathematicians. Turing approached it differently. He imagined an abstract machine following precise instructions, reading symbols from a tape, changing them, and moving step by step through a calculation. The machine did not exist physically. It existed only in his mathematics. But the idea was revolutionary. In 1936, Turing published on computable numbers, describing what became known as the Turing machine and establishing fundamental limits on what mechanical procedures could accomplish. He had not built a modern computer. He had done something more fundamental. He had described, mathematically, what a general-purpose computing machine could be. The world was still years away from electronic computers. Yet Turing was already asking what machines could calculate, and where the limits of computation might lie. Soon, however, the abstract world of mathematics would collide with a very real one. A war was approaching Europe, and Turing's unusual way of thinking was about to become a weapon. In 1939, the world Turing had been studying suddenly changed. Germany invaded Poland, and Britain prepared for war. Turing was recruited by Britain's government code and cipher school, arriving at Bletchley Park on September 4, 1939, one day after Britain declared war on Germany. Inside the quiet country estate, mathematicians, linguists, engineers, and codebreakers were gathering for a secret purpose. They were trying to read German military communications. At the center of their problem was Enigma, a machine that transformed ordinary messages into seemingly meaningless combinations of letters. Every day, German forces could change its settings. That meant yesterday's solution could become useless the next morning. Turing was assigned to the Enigma research section under veteran codebreaker Dilly Knox. He quickly began producing ideas. But he was not working alone. British cryptanalysts were building on crucial work already done by Polish mathematicians before the war. Turing's task was to push that work further. The challenge was enormous. Somewhere inside thousands of meaningless letters were real orders. Orders that could determine where ships sailed, where submarines attacked, and where soldiers moved. Turing now had to find a way to make those hidden messages readable. And the answer would require a machine of his own. The problem was enormous. Every day, German operators changed the settings of their Enigma machines, creating countless possible combinations. Turing needed a way to search through those possibilities far faster than a human could. So he began designing a machine. Working with mathematician Gordon Welchman, Turing developed the bomb, building on crucial earlier work by Polish cryptanalysts. The bomb did not simply read an Enigma message. Instead, it systematically tested possible settings, allowing codebreakers to narrow down the possibilities and identify settings that could reveal the day's messages. But the machine was only part of the solution. Human codebreakers still had to find clues, create the right settings for the bomb, and examine the results. The work demanded patience. A wrong assumption could send the entire process in the wrong direction. A useful clue could suddenly open a path through thousands of possibilities. By the autumn of 1940, the bomb was being used to help break Enigma encrypted messages. Turing had turned an apparently impossible search into a systematic process. But now came the most dangerous part. The machines could help Britain read German messages. The question was, what should Britain do with the information? The bomb was working, but breaking the code was only the beginning. Inside Bletchley Park, decrypted German messages were becoming valuable intelligence. Turing and his colleagues could now uncover information about German military operations, including the movements of U-boats threatening Allied shipping. By 1941, Bletchley Park was regularly breaking the German naval Enigma key known as Dolphin. But there was a dangerous problem. Britain could not suddenly act on every message it decoded. If German commanders noticed that their movements were being anticipated too often, they might realize that Enigma had been compromised. The entire secret could collapse. So intelligence had to be handled carefully. A message might reveal where a submarine was operating, where supplies were moving, or what German commanders were planning. But knowing something, and being able to act on it safely, were not the same thing. Turing was no longer working on an abstract mathematical problem. His calculations were connected to real ships, real soldiers, and real lives. And while the people receiving the intelligence understood its importance, almost nobody outside the secret operation knew what was happening inside Bletchley Park. The work had to remain invisible. Turing was helping Britain see through Germany's secret communications, while the world remained completely unaware of the man behind the mathematics. In 1945, the war in Europe was over. The German armies had been defeated, and the enormous code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park was dismantled. But Turing could not tell the world what he had done. His wartime work remained protected by official secrecy. So instead of returning home as a celebrated war hero, he moved into a new chapter of his life. At the National Physical Laboratory, he worked on the design of the ACE, one of the earliest detailed designs for a stored program electronic computer. The idea that had once existed only in his mathematical imagination was becoming a machine. Then, in 1948, Turing joined the University of Manchester, where he worked on some of Britain's earliest computers and helped develop the ideas that would shape the future of computing. He was no longer trying to defeat an enemy's cipher. He was asking a much stranger question. Could a machine actually think? In 1950, he proposed a practical way to explore that question, an experiment that would become known as the Turing test. The war had ended, but Turing's most important battle with the future was only beginning. In January 1952, Alan Turing's life changed in a way no mathematical problem could prepare him for. Police investigated his relationship with another man in Manchester, and Turing was prosecuted for indecency under laws that criminalized homosexual activity between men. The man who had helped Britain rid enemy communications was now standing before a British court. Turing pleaded guilty. He was given a choice between imprisonment and probation. He chose probation, but it came with a devastating condition. He was required to undergo hormonal treatment intended to reduce his libido. The consequences went beyond the treatment itself. His security clearance was withdrawn, cutting him off from the secret work that had once made his unusual abilities so valuable to Britain. Yet Turing continued working. He returned to mathematics, developing his research into morphogenesis, exploring how mathematical processes could explain patterns in living organisms. His work showed that even after everything he had endured, his mind was still reaching toward unexplored questions. But the country he had helped defend had changed his life forever. Turing had spent years solving problems that threatened millions of lives. Now he faced a different kind of problem, one created not by an enemy machine, but by the society around him. On June 7, 1954, Alan Turing died at his home in Wilmslow, Cheshire. He was only 41 years old. The inquest recorded his death as suicide, caused by cyanide poisoning, although the precise circumstances surrounding his death have remained the subject of historical discussion. For decades, much of the public knew little about what Turing had actually accomplished during the war. The secrecy surrounding Bletchley Park had hidden his contribution. But his ideas could not remain hidden forever. The mathematical concepts he developed helped establish the foundations of modern computer science. His work on machine intelligence opened an entirely new field, and his wartime code-breaking eventually became recognized as a crucial part of the Allied effort. The tragedy was that Turing never lived to see how far his ideas would travel. He had imagined machines performing calculations long before computers became part of everyday life. He had asked whether machines could think before artificial intelligence existed. And he had helped Britain read messages that its enemies believed were secure. Yet the country he helped defend had prosecuted him for being homosexual. Today, Turing is remembered not as an outcast, but as one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. The man once forced into secrecy became a symbol of human intelligence, curiosity, and the cost of intolerance. His war was over. His life was gone. But his ideas were only beginning to change the world.